everybody. Welcome to the Catholic Brothers. This is the first episode of Upon Review.
Upon Review. We've been wanting to do this for a long time. So Upon Review is basically where we go back and we look at film or media or music that we all grew up with, we all know, and on this side of adulthood, and specifically on this side of adult Catholicism, looking back and sort of asking, was it good? Was it any good? What kind of a message did it have? Sometimes they're excellent, sometimes they're complete rubbish. So we figured that we would start a whole playlist on our channel that would go back.
Who's this other guy on with us?
Yes. So with that, we're super happy to invite John Rokosz. Okay, so John Rokosz is the director of music at Precious Blood of Jesus Parish in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He actually conducts a Schola of 12 voices for the traditional Latin Mass, and their repertoire consists of Gregorian chant and sacred polyphony, dating from the Middle Ages to today. You can actually check them out at MPBOJ, Most Precious Blood of Jesus.com. He's also the co-founder, as it turns out, of White Ball Productions, a Pittsburgh production company that specializes in film, voice recording, and music composition. So you can check them out also at whiteballproductions.com. But that's why we really want to bring John on. He's super insightful, a lot of fun to talk about this stuff with. And of course, just with your experience in film and storytelling, we thought you'd be like a perfect addition to this part of our channel. So
Thanks, guys. He is our cousin. So
you weren't going to tell anyone.
Cat's out of the bag, yeah.
Yeah. So so with that, John, is there anything you want to add to your introduction? Did I do a good job?
No, that was great. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. If I could, I just want to give like a real brief synopsis of my journey of faith and education and everything like that. So I was like you guys, grew up Catholic school all my life. Went to Duquesne University, graduated for music technology with an emphasis on composition. And it was actually at Duquesne that I had stopped going to Mass. And I had kind of drifted. After I graduated from Duquesne, I was just kind of working a menial job and not really doing too much with music. And I actually was asked to be a singer for the Schola at the traditional Latin Mass in Pittsburgh. And my first reaction was, I'm not singing for any church choir. I remember saying that to myself. And here I am about 12 years later, now the director and, a full practicing Catholic again. So I really do credit the traditional Latin Mass with saving my faith, bringing me back into the church because of the authenticity of the preaching, the authenticity of the Mass itself, the dignity, solemnity of the liturgy. I remember thinking when I was first there, I felt like something else was happening here. I remember just like being struck and thinking, something else is going on here that is not part of this world. And I remember being so struck by that. And I just became like more and more interested in it. And of course, the music is just gorgeous and such a craft to try to learn. It's nothing that I had ever really prepared for. And so just learning on the job with my really excellent directors, kind of just dove into it, and I've loved it ever since.
That's the best way to do it. I mean,
it's kind of your story.
Yeah, it is kind of my story. You stole my story, John. No, I mean, I was at the precipice. I was doing a lot of reading, and I was, my mind was kind of coming to terms with becoming Catholic again. But it was really when I attended Latin Mass that it pushed me over the edge and said, oh, this is where I need to be. So kind of a similar thing for me. Whereas we were in Protestant and you just kind of maybe left the church, but we went into Protestant and then came back. But it was through the Latin Mass that I, in particular, came back too. So.
Yeah, and so with that, that's actually a good segue into talking a little bit about sacred music, which is what the first episode of this is going to be about. I think since, the post-1960s, Catholic implementation of the Mass of Pope Paul VI, we've had a lot of music also emerge from that. And I think a lot of us are, sort of just looking back now upon review of all the songs that we grew up with, I Am the Bread of Life, or I don't even know, off the top of my head. I mean, I've even heard, yeah, All Are Welcome. I've heard Shine, Jesus, Shine, actually, at a Catholic Mass before, believe it or not. But just looking at that and saying, sort of, well, what happened here? Because I know that in the Second Vatican Council, it says the Gregorian chant is supposed to be preeminent.
Yeah, the preeminent.
Preeminent. And now you go and like you're hard pressed to even hear one Gregorian chant song in any mass. So I think it actually is a good time for us to sort of dive into that topic and to kind of talk about it, to see what we grew up with. And
yeah, sure. So I have a similar I have a similar observation about the music, and I feel like myself growing up in the Novus Ordo became very used to the City of God, though the mountains may fall, all of these, all these hits, and I remember as a kid, really, like I remember being in second grade, and they would announce the closing song, and the closing song is number 55, though the mountains may fall, and you'd hear yes. Just yes from across the congregation.
They weren't hissing.
They were so excited, and you just had a whole school full of second graders and third graders singing this, though the mountains may fall. So I mean, and here I am saying that I guess there is something to be said for that, a community aspect and like a devotional aspect. But that's one big thing that I think is really getting blurred with the music of the Novus Ordo. Is this comparison between liturgical music and devotional music? It's what I like to say about the Novus Ordo music is it's low-hanging fruit. It's really easy for people to pick on it. It's very easy to say, "Oh, this music's crap," and whatnot. But for better or for worse, I mean, there are tons of hymns and tons of songs that have varying degrees of effectiveness, if you will. But does that really make them inherently bad? I wouldn't necessarily say that. Considerations aside from the text,
especially with a lot of them, the words are pulling from Scripture. So these are scriptural words, right?
Right, so exactly. Yeah, but for me, I think it's more like the execution of the music too itself. It's not very liturgical. It's not very dignified. And I think that it may have a place in devotionals outside and in any kind of like retreat functions or things like that. But like actually in the Mass itself, I think it becomes borderline distracting. And I think it takes us away from the focus, which should be the sacrifice of the Mass.
Well, even more so, I think on that point, it's more than just being distracting. It's actually very common, right? So it's weird because I was actually, so the other day I was listening to like Christian music, right? And if you listen to Christian, like, contemporary music, Protestant Christian music, they've like upped their game. Like it's like they are playing like excellent modern music. It's like very, I know, but it's like an excellent like production for what they're doing. They're not doing the Mass over there. You know what I mean? So like you're just listening to the music and evaluating it as music, and you're like, this is great modern music, But you look at the Novus Ordo music, and you're like, it's not good ancient music. It's
a generations music. It's like this music kind of grew up in those 80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s, and
it's like stuck in a genre, I guess, of sorts.
Well,
and go ahead, yeah. So
what you said, I think is really true. It's common, but it's also familiar, and I think that's a big thing. And I was listening to another popular Catholic podcast, and they were talking about how familiar a lot of these hymns are, and how there actually is something to be said for, everybody knows this one, so now we can join as a community and we sing "Gather Us In" or something like that together, and it's like I don't deny that there's something to be said for a communal aspect to that, but in my opinion, we're relying too heavily on familiarity, and I know this one, or because it's comfortable and it's of this world. And it really comes back to what I think is so successful about Polyphony is that it really does. It's almost mystical, and it really takes you out of yourself.
Wouldn't you say that if they're focusing on these hymns because they're familiar, they're common? I think maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the problem with that is that now you're competing with the world and the world's music, and you're going to lose that one. You're going to lose that battle, right? So people are going to the liturgy and they're hearing, common music, right? And then they're hearing better music from the secularists.
And that's my point. If I listen to like Christian Protestant music, I'm like, okay, see, like that's like good modern music. Like it actually sounds really good, and it's like with the times. And that was the original thought behind some of this music. Like, we want to get up with the times, you know, and reach the youth and stuff. But like, I listen to this music, like I would never listen to this music like in my car. You know what I'm saying?
And so the church ends up competing with the outside world, and we're going to lose that.
So it fails on the part of even being like in line with historic sacred music. So it fails on that score, but then it also fails on the score of even being contemporary because it's actually outdated. So you're kind of like, I don't know what this is, you know?
Well, I think because another thing is that it doesn't seem very organic to the liturgy to me. And much like you say about Protestant music, my observation of Protestant music, it is much the same. It's like, and it may be a very well executed piece of music, but it's almost like it exists for itself to be a good piece of music. And so it's, you know, maybe you're totally engaged in that music, and maybe that's the purpose of the service. I'm not really too familiar with.
Well, that brings up a point though, because Martin Luther in his Reformation, he would use the tunes and melodies of the secular world to use for hymns.
Of the pub.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Of the pub, so that
yes.
it would be familiar to people. And you see that still happening in Protestantism.
Yes.
But that's not how it happened in Catholicism. Right? You know, and especially in the Western Church, you read about St. Ambrose introducing hymnody into the church in 386 or so. He's using Eastern chant, and he introduces it into the Western church at a time when they're fighting the Arians, right? So there's a different organic development that's there for Catholics.
Yeah. And there's an old myth, just jumping off of that, there's an old myth too that people always regurgitate that says that, like, you know, the Middle Ages, like they drew upon like secular music for the mass, you know, and actually, no, they didn't. Like that's actually not true. There has always been secular music and sacred music. There's always been the music that you hear at mass, and then the music of the pub. And that's why, like in Dan's point, that like the Protestants were drawing on those familiar sort of like, you know, pub music or like courtly music or jester music, you know, to write their hymns.
And there's some good hymns, but
yeah. Well, on this side, it sounds almost old to us, but it's actually, you know, the songs of the local pub. But for
it is worth noting, though. It is worth noting, though, you know, around the turn of the century, that there was, and that's one of the things that Pope Pius X in Trala Solicitudinity wrote about. He wrote about the fact that people were writing operatic Kyries and Glorias and Masses. So people like Rossini, for example, was a bit of a violator of that. They would have these big, grand, like 10-minute Kyries and these big operatic Masses, and they were actually based on, a lot of them were based on themes, melodies from operas and things like that. And so that's one of the things that Pope Pius X really came out and spoke against, and said the primary foundation for all polyphony should be the chant.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great point. I was just watching on Instagram TV. I just told him the other day I was watching a Latin mass, and there was an operatic mass, and I was also turned off by that. You know, it was a production. It became amusement. It became entertainment to me, and so
because it forsakes beauty and goes into the gaudy, almost. You know what I mean? Like so it's like on this side you're falling apart because it's not beautiful. You know, like whatever we're listening to. And then you have the chants, first the Gregorian chants, and then what grows up into polyphony that is beautiful. And in fact, if you ask people, like you play a song for them, you know, you play like a Gregorian chant for them, they'll say like, oh yeah, it's beautiful. They're never going to say like, oh yeah, that was kind of silly. You know, or they're going to say, oh, that was very light, or like, that was kind of bizarre. They're going to say, yeah, I mean, that was really relaxing, or that was beautiful, you know, or meditative. You know, so you're like, okay, so listen to the adjectives, you know, but then when you go past beauty, you move into the gaudy. And it's the same with architecture. It's the same thing.
Well, St. Augustine wants to keep that balance too. And that's why he sees chant as the best, because he refers to chant as speech rhythm, right? That's what song is supposed to be, speech rhythm, right? So that the words are clearer, and there's a melody that you also everybody can join into that. You can pick up a Gregorian chant quickly, you know, when you're hearing it done. And so that's the balance he wants to strike too with hymnody, because he was struggling with the gaudy. He was struggling with, this is just becoming entertainment, or the other side of it is not having anything, right? So that debate's happening in the early church.
Well, that is a constant balancing act, I can tell you, for a traditional Latin mass music director, because you want to have an eclectic repertoire. And so, it's important to have a foundation of Palestrina, Tallis, Byrd, Victoria, all of the, the Renaissance masters. But in addition to that, you do want to get into classical music. You want to get into Mozart if you can. You want to get into Schubert has a lovely mass, Haydn. And it's such a balancing act that a lot of these are kind of like, they're teetering on becoming their own production. And it is a constant balancing act.
But you're making the effort to do it. You see what I mean? Like, but you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah, that's true.
Music, you're making that effort. So even if it's hard to do and it's hard to find that balance, you're at least in the ballpark, right? But if we're singing, we can make a difference, go and make a difference. You're not even trying. You're not even trying to get there.
Yeah.
You're a good singer.
Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah, that's.
I have a personal question for you, actually. What is your view of the role of the organ with chant?
Yeah. Okay. So, well,
I just threw that at you. I was just literally just popped in my head. I wanted to ask you that.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, first of all, the organ itself. Let me talk about that. So, Pope Pius X is pretty clear about this when he talks about the official instrument of the church. When actually, like, I was like, oh, he's going to say the organ. He said the official instrument of the church is the voice.
The voice.
And then other than that, the primacy goes to the church organ. And so when it comes to, organ versus piano and all that kind of stuff, obviously, like organ, I think is the most appropriate. It's the most befitting for the dignity of the mass. It like puts you in that zone. It's that sound. Now, when it comes to, are you asking maybe like, should it be chant be accompanied or by organ?
Because sometimes you'll be like, if we're talking about contemporary Catholic hymns or something, sometimes the organ is really carrying it, and you end up just enjoying the organ more than you even do the voices or the words. Mm-hmm. And that Augustine would find horrendous. Yeah. He wants to concentrate on the words, and but then there's also the use of the organ with like just supporting voices, right? Like just moving the voices along.
So I can tell you from my personal taste as a director, we don't accompany any of our chants with any organ. Everything is done a cappella. And nice. It's really awesome when you bust out like Mass 8, which is Missa de Angelis. A lot of people know that one, and you can just hear the congregation down there singing it with you. It's really striking. They'll even sing the Salve Regina with you, or the Ave Verum, and none of it accompanied. What I do like to do is, especially for like an offertory or our communion piece, I like to improvise on the chant and then just break into just unison, unaccompanied chant. But that's I've been to your guys' church, and I believe that they do accompany the ordinary of the mass, and I actually found that pretty effective. I think it kind of comes down to taste. I think because especially in the way that your director does it, I think it's really appropriate. I think it's more of that supporting the singing, and just moving everybody along. From my experience, though, every time that the organ has accompanied, I think it actually drags the momentum of the chant down. And and if you check out,
you have 12-piece choir.
No, but actually, I'm glad you said that because the organ in its original invention though was to imitate the voice. It was to imitate the human voice. So,
which is why
that's why it's a little different when you're talking about an organ versus a piano or a guitar or these other instruments, because the organ was to imitate the voice, and that's probably why the church was okay with it, because it was controversial. Most people don't know that, but when the organ was first played in churches, it was very controversial. A lot of people are like, "This doesn't belong in church," But as it was developed and as it was synced up with the vocal tradition, it was very clear that like, no, wait a second, obviously this thing was invented to imitate the human voice, where you don't have a lot of human voices present, who can sing well. And so in that sense, it is in line with what the Pope himself is saying there, where he says that the voice is the primary instrument, so every instrument that comes after should build on that. And that's why the strumming or the dinking of the piano and the pounding.
Yeah, it's very inorganic. It's very synthetic to it. Much like the development of polyphony in itself just came from an original just line of chant, and then you went into what was called organum, and so you'd have someone would sing that same chant line, but up maybe a fifth. And so you'd have these two identical lines of chant, like, going at the same time. And it's a really awesome sound, by the way. But that's how it started. So then they're like, well, why don't we make a couple of little ornaments? And it's so beautiful to see that development, which actually turned into counterpoint, which turned into polyphony, which turned into Baroque music, which turned into classical, romantic, and it brought us all the way into the music that we know today. This is all based on church music, on Gregorian chant. And I think it's important for people to recognize that. The jazz that you listen to today is based on the modes and the counterpoint that was established in Gregorian chant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not sure what you would call the genre of the modern hymns, but I always thought it takes its cue from rock music, or 1950s, 60s rock music, or soft rock, or folk, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Which I guess I would argue, Johnny, if you agree, that seems like now that's a break from what was handed on, right? From Gregorian chant to what you're saying, to romantic music, to classical music. Is that soft rock or folk kind of a break from that tradition?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would.
Or put it this way. So how about this? How about we say? Because I know what Dan's saying. I think the point is. There you go, Dan. I think in every age, this music, let's just call it sacred music, okay? In every age, sacred music is relevant because the mass is happening. You know what I mean? Like so mm-hmm. There's never a time when it's like, oh, sacred music is kind of like outdated. You know, like there's never because even if you go to your local like classical music performance at the at the local music hall, it's still being performed today. Like, do you think 500 years from now they're going to be playing? I don't know, like the Beatles. There's a reason why it's called the oldies, right? Like they call them the oldies because it's outdated. Like so when we take music that is very temporal. Something that's sort of locked into a point in history and then put it into the mass, we're almost making the mass temporal. But the mass is supposed to be beyond time, beyond space, something that goes above that.
But doesn't that speak to the origin of the piece of music itself then? I mean, the origin of all this polyphony comes down to chants that originated from the musical tradition of the oldest traditions of the church. Whereas these hymns were just kind of created just by somebody sitting down at their piano one day and just writing what they thought was a good song. So it's completely removed from the mass itself. And so, and it's just, it's plain to see when it actually comes to singing it, and it's noticeable.
Yeah. And the thing is, I always say this, I'm like, we know who's going to preserve jazz music, right? Like a local nightclub. There's always going to be like a
elevator.
Jazz, there's always going to be like a jazz club. Yeah, or an elevator. Like
you're always going to need an elevator.
There, like there's always going to be like cultural like pockets that will preserve certain types of music, right? But who's going to preserve Gregorian chant if not the church?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, is it going to be like the local library preserving Gregorian chant if we abandon it? It almost seems like it's a duty on our behalf. To preserve it because there are people who bled to give us the mass with its musical accompaniment,
Yeah,
we're sort of like abandoning it. But like, okay, well then if we abandon it, it's gone.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to talk about was when it comes to polyphony and when it comes to Gregorian chant, there's really something to be said for the effort that it takes to execute these things. When you're going up there and you're playing the guitar and you're singing, any number of hymns, call it what you will. It's I hate to be too negative about it because I grew up with it and I have fond memories of it, but it does kind of border on lazy to me. When you're talking about preparing Gregorian chant, and let's talk about it from a boots on the ground actual parish standpoint. So my parish choir every single Sunday has to prepare all of the Gregorian propers. We do the full Gregorian propers. So that means an introit, that means a gradual and Alleluia, that means an offertory and a communion. These are 4 pieces of Gregorian chant, each of them no less than 2 minutes long. So that's easily 10 minutes of music that you're basically sight reading each week, because the text is proper for the day, and so the chants always change. And this is really tough music. I mean, this is very modal music, so it's not like do a deer here. It's like very very old sounding. It's very modal, and it's very tough. And to have to do that every single week to week, there's like an incredible amount of effort that goes into that. Now you take polyphony, Renaissance polyphony, all of these lines going along together, the independence of the lines, but still they have counterpoint with somebody going on top of it. You have an idea how difficult it is to be a tenor singing in the choir and trying to hear the running thirds that you have with the soprano, for example, or knowing that you have to back off here because
let alone listening for it.
just trust me, these are technical terms you don't need to understand. But it's really, really difficult to execute, and there is so much to be said for bringing that level of effort to every Mass. And I've had such a great experience with musicians that have come and joined the choir, and after the first rehearsal, they're just like, I miss this. I miss singing in choir. I miss singing well. I'm pushing myself. And these are people that have gigs. They know they sing. Maybe they sing in other choirs. Maybe they sing for the Novus Ordo. But they come to the Latin Mass and they say, "Man, I miss singing well. I miss really singing to the best of my ability." And then you talk to any priest that puts together the chant and just following the rubrics for a solemn high Mass, for example. I mean, they're sweating. They're sweating under all those vestments about it. They're practicing all week about it, and they'll be very honest about it. And I think it's great when they talk about that. They're putting so much in there, and there's something to be said for that. People are working very hard to make this excellent, and that's the thing about the liturgy too. That especially the traditional Latin Mass, it's excellent. So everything must be excellent. The preaching must be excellent. The service up in the sanctuary must be excellent. Up in the choir loft, the organ, the choir must be excellent, and the congregation sees that. And that's why they come. That's one of the most beautiful chances for evangelization there is. And I take that very seriously as a music director. Take that very seriously that we can attract people to this Mass because we do excellent music. We try to. We try our best. We don't accept anything less than our best. So I think we're on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. And it's really awesome because we have like our online account. And every month or so, I will check in and see how we're doing. Are people listening to us? And we have people listening to us in Brazil, in Russia, in New Zealand. It's just so amazing that there's an interest in this music. And we have 2 albums. The first is called Christum Natum Adoremus, which is an Advent and Christmas repertoire. And then the second album is Resurrexit Sicut Dixit, which is a Lenten Easter album. So a lot of great work into it.
It has universal appeal. Like just what you said there, like, people are listening from all over the world, but like if I play like a jazz piece for somebody in Timbuktu, like they're going to be like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's cool in America, but there's something about the universality of the music as well, that it is universally beautiful. People vote with their feet. Dan and I always say this, like people vote with their feet. If you want to know what beautiful architecture is, look at where people walk. They go to Europe. They go to see the cathedrals. Like, they're walking to Jerusalem. Like, they're going to certain places for a reason.
Yeah, and ironically, that this music, Gregorian chant and Polyphony and all that, actually cuts through the noise because it is different than everything else everybody's hearing. So I think that's what people are drawn to it.
Oh, and Russian chant, like even Orthodox chant, is unbelievable. I mean,
beautiful, just beautiful.
And there it is. So there's a different style to that. But again, universal appeal. Anyone who listens to it, they would not be like, "Oh, that was kind of silly." No, they're going to say this is absolutely beautiful, right? Well,
yeah, and it says a lot for the universality of the traditional Mass. That's what it all stems from.
And the objectivity of beauty. Because anybody who says that beauty is not objective is basically saying there is no God, right? Because beauty is an attribute of God. So if you say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, this is C.S. Lewis's argument in The Abolition of Man. He's basically saying that if you're saying that, you're basically saying it's a different way of saying there's no God. Beauty can't be in the eye of the beholder. There has to be an objective nature to beauty, even if you're trying to approximate, like you said. There's people who like approximate it better than others, and you're trying to find where the line is. The point is that you're moving in the direction, towards objective.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's any untold theorems about even painting, like the golden rule, and then you'll see the golden rule, like ratios and proportions in paintings and that kind of stuff. And Da Vinci was, of course, a huge. He would use that all the time. And even with music, there's laws of counterpoint, rules of counterpoint, things that happen with 2 lines of music that just don't sound right. And there actually is, there's actually science behind, which is like really fascinating, probably for another time. But there's just rules about parallel fifths, too many parallel fifths, or like contrary motion is the most powerful kind of motion. There's so much objectivity to that. where there are rules established for a reason. They naturally lend themselves to more effectiveness, and you can stray from those rules, but it's almost like you have to have a reason for doing so.
I always hear the comparison of music to math. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Music,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know math is objective, solving the formula.
Exactly.
Oh, well, and it really comes down to, again, probably a subject for another time, but coming down to sound waves and the overtone series, and there's a whole bunch of beautiful math that goes along with that. My sister would probably love it.
Right. Yeah. So all that to say that, so we've kind of talked a little bit about, the progeny of modern mass music and sort of, our initial reactions to it. Not that all of it is bad, but there's also a truth part to this, right? Like with the lyrics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are. Yeah. What would you say?
There is I have noticed, and I'm sure we've all noticed this. Some hymns actually have pretty misrepresentative text, text that really kind of strays away from what we should be really talking about. And I think if we're really being honest, we can take a look at some of the Lenten hymnody that exists in the Novus Ordo. There's that classic, someone, I can't remember where it was online, but someone really ripped into that "We Rise Again from Ashes" song. And it's so true, because it mentions everything but sin. At absolute worst, they say, from the good we failed to do. Okay, there's not actually just any admission of real sin. There's no admission. Passive. Yeah, and it's just like maybe the absence of good is all they're willing to bend to, But that's actually selling us short to the beauty of the Lenten liturgical season.
Well, absolutely.
The need for repentance
sin of omission, but you didn't mention the sin of commission. You did the sin you're committing knowingly. Yeah.
One of them that there's also. Go ahead.
I was going to say not in terms necessarily of music, but there's also a couple things in the Novus Ordo that I find that are also sending wrong messages. One of them really strikes to me is the vestments, especially for funerals. I don't know if you've gotten into this at all, but the whole traditional Latin Mass always has the black vestments for funerals, and it's interesting for the Novus Ordo, they're always white. And of course, white is the promise of heaven and the promise of Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And it's done from a good place. I believe it's done from a good place, comforting those who have lost a loved one. Yeah. But is that really the heart of what the church is trying to teach us? And I think that's what I'm getting at with the misrepresentation of this text. I think that church is trying to teach us with black vestments for funerals that we don't know the state of their souls, just like we don't know the state of our own. And just like, tick tock, we better take care of our own affairs before we're in the same position.
Yeah, and I would tell you that every great saint down through history, always their advice is always contemplate upon death. Mm-hmm. Think about death, and you'll be able to know how to live, right? Mm-hmm. So the Latin Mass and wearing a black vestments, concentrating on death, it's a good thing to concentrate on death. That's what makes you holy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the absence of joviality, I guess, with Gregorian chant. It's really interesting because there was one time where I was talking to Dan about this, where we were listening to a piece, and I said,
we talk a lot.
Yeah, and I said, what's funny about this piece, and actually, like most Gregorian chant, is that you don't know what emotion it is. Is this happy? Because absent of the words, just listen to the sound of it. You're like, is this this could be a happy song. This could be the soundtrack to a really sad moment. This could be the soundtrack to a very just stable moment of contemplation and reflection. It's like so it's not tied even to emotion. There's no happy clappy Gregorian chant song and a very sad
interesting.
Right. That's a really good point, because you have all these different personalities coming to the Mass, and they have all these different levels of emotion. But with Gregorian chant, I think that's a really great point, is that it draws us in to be of one mind, like St. Paul says. Right. Because we're bringing our different emotions to the Mass, but Gregorian chant kind of levels us off and brings us all together into this one moment of.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the Byzantine Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox too. Like you go into their liturgy, and you don't know what emotion it is. But you do know that it's worship.
Yeah.
So
you know that it's serious, but
it's there's gravity to it. So you know that, but you're not sure. Again, like, are we celebrating or are we sad? And what's really kind of concerning to me, especially my wife's 100% Greek, right? So one thing that is really on my heart is the reunification of East and West. I always will talk about include the Byzantine Catholic, include the Orthodox, and there's a reason for that. And I think that this playing around with the liturgy that has happened and playing around with the music has really put us out of sync with even the East. The East like walks into our mass and says like, wait a minute, what happened in Rome in the last century?
Yeah. I walked away for a century and they changed everything.
Yeah. But there is hope, right? I mean, so from your experience.
So from my experience, being a younger music director and having several friends who are around my age, I also heard this. There was another Catholic a podcast that was talking about, who's clinging to all of this music, who's perpetuating this music, and I heard them talk about it like it was the music directors that were doing this. And I'm going to tell you right here and now, I'm sure there's a population of, older music directors that maybe don't have a lot of experience in Gregorian chant and that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you from my experience that there are a lot of pastors and a lot of congregations that are demanding this music, that are demanding the happy, clappy, Novus Ordo, familiar music. And a lot of these music directors roll their eyes every time they got to play Gather Us In or something like that. They roll their eyes. And if you talk to a lot of the younger priests, a lot of the seminarians, I think there's a lot of hope because I think they get it. I think they get exactly what we're talking about, the intrinsic beauty of Gregorian chant and the Latin Mass. And I think that even now you're starting to see it, if you're watching WTN, like you're seeing more and more chant slipping back into the Mass. And I think it's really encouraging. Even if it's just a parish that's doing Missa d'Angelis, a really simple chant. It's beautiful, and people get to know that, and they can see.
That's what we do. I mean, that's what we do really a lot of times here at our parish.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of hope. I think it's so I'm really looking forward to the future because I think like all of the musicians, all the young musicians are attracted to the older Mass. They're attracted to the beauty and excellence of the music.
That's good. That's great.
I think it's a good place to punctuate. Right?
Well, the outro is going to be a piece of his
music,
so.
For the outro, we're going to play a piece from Johnny's crew, and then we'll also put up their album cover, maybe latest album cover, and then where you can go to learn more about them and to get some of their stuff. And be sure to stay tuned for our next episode of Upon Review because we're going to be turning to film now that we've done our music part. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Johnny, it's been awesome talking to you about this. I think
Thank you guys.
Really enjoy this one.
Thanks for the time.
I hope so.
It took us like a half hour to an hour to set up this
one. All right, so we had a lot of technical difficulties. All right, Johnny, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, guys.
All right, see you later.